Hi, welcome back to the Weekly Wine. This week we have Parsha Behar. So we're coming up to the end of the book of Leviticus. And once again, in the Weekly Wine, what we're talking about here, there's nothing really I'm sharing that you probably couldn't find anywhere else. There's nothing I'm sharing that couldn't be found that hasn't been taught before. The whole point of the Weekly Why is to get us to think about something, the same lessons we've heard so many times over in the Parsha classes, in the Torah classes, but the difference is that I want you and I want us to think about it just a little bit differently, to have just a little bit of a different perspective. So one thing I want to talk about, there's a verse in Leviticus, Vayikra, chapter 25, verse right at the beginning. It says, God spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, when you come into the land that I give you, you shall observe a Sabbath rest for God." Now you're probably familiar with this. This is the Shemitah, the sabbatical year for the land. Every 7th year you let the land sit. And it's very interesting. So what happens is, of course, every 7 years the Jewish people are commanded to observe a sabbatical year, the Shemitah, during which all this, agricultural activity is ceased. Now it's very interesting, again, this verse, how does it begin? It says, God spoke to Mount Sinai, God spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, basically observe the sabbatical year. It's very interesting. Why does it say God spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai? All the commandments were taught at Mount Sinai, so what's the special connection between this commandment of Shemitah and Mount Sinai? So it's very interesting. Rabbi Chaim Joseph David Azulay, what he said, you don't need to remember the name, but what he said is that the whole point of Sinai and Shemitah is that it served to remind the people that all wealth and all success, or lack thereof, came from a divine source, i.e. Mount Sinai. So a farmer, for example, this farmer who every 7th year lets his land lay fallow, he can easily see the fruit of his labor, and he can think, my strength and the strength of my hand, this has created the wealth for me, That's from Deuteronomy, that quote. So it's very interesting. So the whole point here is that requiring the Jewish people to cease labor for an entire year is a very, very profound statement that all wealth comes from God. Now, it's not just talking about financial wealth. It's not just talking about how big your paycheck is. It's talking about all success that you receive. And the whole point of this, why this is so special, is because this is the greatest of human temptations. That feeling that the fruit of their hands, the labor, that is their success, Yes, I managed to score a 1600 on my SAT. I got into law school. I have a great job. I have a great family. I have 10 children. It's all because of me. Your effort is up to you, but ultimately the whole point of this, and ultimately possibly the most important take-home lesson that we can possibly take in learning Judaism and in growing in Yiddishkeit, is basically that we have our efforts, but ultimately everything is up to God, and ultimately we have to rely totally on that. We have to do our part, but with the realization that ultimately everything that we have comes from a divine source. So that's it. Best wishes. Shabbat Shalom. God bless.